Motel rooms, cheap, convenient, and often forgotten. But what if the room you checked into carried a past far darker than anything you could imagine? Tonight, we're going to dive into the terrifying story of one traveler's night in a motel that should never have been entered. A room that holds whispers of the dead and refuses to let its guests sleep in peace. So dim the lights, close the door, and prepare yourself for the terrifying true tale of a haunted motel room. Step 2. Story setup. The arrival. It was late autumn when Michael found himself driving down the endless stretch of highway. He had been on the road for nearly 10 hours, his eyes heavy from fatigue, his hands aching from gripping the steering wheel too long. Michael was a traveling salesman, the kind of job that kept him moving from one small town to the next. He had stayed in dozens of motels before, each one blending into the next, faded wallpaper, buzzing neon signs, and the smell of stale cigarettes that clung to the hallways no matter how often they were cleaned. But that night, he was more desperate than usual. A storm was rolling in. The wind howled against his car, carrying sheets of rain that blurred his vision. The radio kept cutting in and out, offering nothing but static and the occasional garbled voice from a station he couldn't quite reach. When the glowing red letters appeared in the distance, he almost sighed with relief. Sunset Motel. The name flickered on and off in broken neon. The building looked old, its paint peeling, its windows dim. It sat alone on the side of the highway, surrounded by nothing but trees and darkness. No cars in the lot, no signs of life. Still, Michael had no choice. He pulled in, parked, and hurried through the rain toward the office. Inside, the lobby was cramped, with a single desk and a faint smell of mildew. A bell sat on the counter, and when Michael tapped it, the sound echoed far too loudly in the empty room. Moments later, a man appeared. He was thin, pale, and seemed older than his years. His hair was slicked back, his uniform a faded burgundy that looked decades out of style. He smiled, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Late night, huh?" the man said, his voice hoarse. Michael nodded. "Yeah, just need a room for the night." The man slid a paper logbook across the counter, along with a tarnished key on a brass ring. "Room 6, he said simply. "End of the hall." Michael scribbled his name, paid in cash, and took the key. The man's eyes followed him the entire time, cold, unblinking, until Michael stepped back out into the rain. The room. Room 6 was exactly what Michael expected, and somehow worse. The wallpaper peeled at the corners. A single light bulb buzzed weakly overhead, casting a sickly yellow glow across the room. The carpet was threadbare, stained with patterns Michael didn't want to imagine. But the strangest thing of all was the smell. It wasn't just mildew or dust. It was heavier, metallic, like iron, almost like blood. Michael tried to ignore it. He dropped his bag on the bed. The mattress sagged under its weight, and went to close the curtains. But when he pulled them shut, he noticed something odd. On the inside of the window frame, scratched into the wood, were words, "Don't let him in." The uneasy feeling, Michael laughed nervously, shaking his head. Probably some prank from a bored guest years ago, he told himself. Motels like this always had weird little quirks. Still, unease crawled through his chest. He double-checked the lock on the door, then sat on the bed and pulled out his phone. No signal, of course. The rain battered the windows, and thunder rolled in the distance. Michael laid down, telling himself he just needed rest. Tomorrow he'd be gone, back on the road, and this place would fade into memory like all the others. But as he closed his eyes, he swore he heard something. A sound coming from the hallway. Footsteps, slow, heavy, dragging. Step 3. Suspense buildup. The first night. Michael lay in the bed, staring at the cracked ceiling. The storm outside had worsened, rain pounding against the glass in a steady rhythm. He told himself that the sound in the hallway was just the old pipes, or maybe the wind. But then the footsteps came again. Step, drag, step, drag. They weren't rushed, they weren't random. Whoever or whatever was out there was moving with purpose. Michael sat up, his heart hammering in his chest. He glanced at the door, half expecting the knob to turn, but it didn't. The footsteps stopped directly outside room 6. Silence, and then a knock, not loud, just 3 soft taps. Knock, knock, knock. Michael froze. He thought about calling out, but something deep inside him told him not to. Instead, he stayed perfectly still, barely breathing. Minutes stretched on like hours, until finally the sound faded away, leaving only the storm. The whisper at the window, he tried to convince himself it was just another guest. But when he woke later that night, he knew it wasn't. It was around 3 a.m. The motel room was cold, unnaturally cold. His breath came out in pale clouds, even though the heater was humming weakly. That's when he heard it. A whisper, right by the window. He turned slowly, dread pooling in his stomach. Through the thin curtains, he could make out the faint outline of a figure standing just outside the glass, a shape that wasn't there before. The whisper grew clearer, a woman's voice, hoarse and broken. "Don't let him in." Michael stumbled out of bed, fumbling for the lamp. When the light flicked on, the figure was gone. Only the words, scratched into the frame, remained, the same warning he had seen earlier. The bathroom mirror, exhausted and shaken. Michael splashed water on his face in the bathroom. The small mirror above the sink was cracked, its edges stained with rust. He leaned forward, gripping the sink, whispering to himself, "It's just in your head. It's just in your head." But when he looked up into the mirror, his reflection wasn't alone. Behind him, in the doorway, stood a tall, shadowy figure, its head tilted unnaturally to one side, its face blurred as though hidden behind smoke. Michael spun around. The doorway was empty. When he turned back to the mirror, the reflection was normal, just him. The phone call, by now, every nerve in his body was on edge. He sat on the bed, staring at the door, when suddenly the phone on the nightstand rang. The shrill sound made him jump. He picked it up slowly, his voice trembling. "Hello." For a long moment, there was only static. Then, faintly, a voice whispered, "Room 6 is his." The line went dead. Michael dropped the phone, his hands shaking. He knew, deep down, that this wasn't a prank. This wasn't his imagination. Something was wrong with this room, and it wasn't going to let him leave easily. Step 4. Climax. The terrifying encounter in the motel room, the part Sabs Ziada intense, or Lamba. Approximately 2,000 plus words. Hoga. Jism. Suspense. Joe hum. Build Kia high. AB full horror main. Explode Karega. Bilkul. Whispered diaries K. Style main. Narrator. KO experience. Itna. Real or horrifying logica. Ki Sun. Wallaby. Andersay Hill. J. The long night. Michael tried everything to calm himself. Deep breaths, pacing the room, even turning on the small television in the corner. But the static-filled screen only made things worse. The channel wouldn't change. Every button he pressed just produced more static, louder and more violent, until he finally yanked the plug from the wall. The room went silent again. That's when the banging started. Not polite knocks, not creaks, but violent, angry pounding from the walls, the ceiling, the door, as though a dozen fists were hammering from the other side. Michael grabbed his bag, ready to run. But when he reached the door, the knob wouldn't turn. Just like the cabin story he'd once heard in passing, the door felt fused to the frame, refusing to move. He yanked, he pulled, he kicked. Nothing. And then he heard it again, the whisper. Only this time, it was right behind him. Don't let him in. He spun around and froze. The man in the room in the far corner, where the shadows were thickest, stood a figure. A tall man, impossibly thin, dressed in what looked like an old motel uniform, the same faded burgundy the desk clerk had worn. But his face wasn't right. The skin sagged as if it were melting. His eyes, nothing but black pits. His mouth stretched impossibly wide into a grin that seemed carved into his skull. Michael backed toward the door, heart racing. The figure didn't move. It just stared, head twitching slightly to the side, as though studying him. And then, slowly, it began to step forward. Every step echoed unnaturally, louder than any human footstep should be. The air grew colder with each movement, frost creeping along the window glass. Michael shouted, "Stay back," but his voice cracked, weak against the weight of the silence. The figure stopped in the middle of the room. For a moment, Michael thought maybe it had listened. But then, in a guttural, rasping voice that seemed to come from everywhere at once, it spoke. "This is my room." The possession Michael tried again to force the door open, slamming his shoulder against it until pain shot down his arm. Behind him, the figure began to laugh, low at first, then rising until it shook the walls. The light bulb above flickered violently, casting the room in flashes of dark and light. And each time the bulb dimmed, the figure was closer. One flash, it stood by the bed. Another flash, it was at the foot of the table. And then, with the light nearly out, it was inches away. Its face so close, Michael could feel the cold radiating from its skin. The whisper returned, dozens of voices overlapping. "Stay forever. Stay forever." Michael screamed, swinging wildly with his fists, but his blows went straight through the figure, as if punching smoke. In that moment, something icy gripped his chest. His body went rigid. He couldn't move, couldn't breathe. The figure leaned closer, its gaping mouth opening wider, wider, until Michael felt himself being pulled forward, like the thing was trying to swallow, not just his body, but his very soul. The escape, suddenly, silence. The light flickered back to life, and the figure was gone. Michael collapsed to the floor, gasping for air. The door, which had refused to open before, now creaked ajar on its own. Without thinking, Michael grabbed his bag and bolted into the rain. He didn't care where he went, as long as it was away from room 6. He drove 4 hours until he reached the next town, his knuckles white on the steering wheel, his mind replaying every second of what he had seen. Aftermath, the next day, he returned to the highway, determined to prove to himself that it had all been a dream, a hallucination from exhaustion. But when he reached the spot where the Sunset Motel should have been, there was nothing. Just an empty lot, overgrown with weeds, the neon sign gone, the building nowhere in sight. Michael pulled over, staring in disbelief. He asked locals at a diner nearby if they knew of the motel. They exchanged uneasy glances before one old man finally said, "That place. Son, it burned down more than 20 years ago." Room 6 was where they found the manager's body. Folks say he never checked out. Step 5. Resolution and outro. Michael never returned to that stretch of highway again. He quit his traveling job within months, moving to a city where motels and empty highways would never haunt his nights. But even now, years later, he says there are times when he wakes at 3 a.m., the hour he first heard that whisper at the motel window. Sometimes, in the silence of his apartment, he swears he hears it again, a woman's voice, faint, broken, warning him in the dark, don't let him in. And every so often, when he drives at night, neon signs flickering in the distance, he refuses to look too closely, because part of him knows one day he might see the Sunset Motel glowing again, waiting for its next guest. Would you dare step inside a room like that, knowing the last person who checked in never truly left? If you've ever had a chilling experience at a motel, a hotel, or even just a strange place while traveling, share your story with us in the comments below. And if tonight's tale unsettled you, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to Whispers in the Dark, and hit the bell icon so you'll never miss the next terrifying story. Until next time, keep your doors locked, your lights low, and remember, sometimes the room you're sleeping in might not be as empty as you think.